Chapter 2 talks mainly about environmental and resource considerations as the world has developed, as economies develop and grow. Um, and it starts with an overview of how things have grown, and particularly points out that growth um, was very slow for the majority of the Earth's history. Um, and then has sort of boomed since the Industrial Revolution. Um, and so they show a few charts of population growth, um, and also talk about GDP, the way that economists usually measure economic growth. Um, and so this chart here shows population growth since 1960 or the early 1960s, 62 or so, um, and also the changes in food production and gross world product. So that's like GDP, but on a world scale, and energy use. So you can see that all of those things have gone up significantly since the 60s, um, but that the gross world product has grown the fastest over time. Um, Meaning that, yes, population has grown, but that our standard of living has also grown. We're not seeing the kind of declines that some people predicted back when population first started really taking off. Um, People predicted that we would outgrow the world's resources really quickly, and everything would go downhill. And that has not happened. We've had technological growth and growth in production that has increased our living standards at the same time that that population has grown. Of course, you can break that out into different countries. It looks different. So the book is sure to point out that economic growth has looked very different for high income countries than for middle income and low income countries. So that's important to keep in mind, that when we talk about these world averages, these things really, the span of how these things affect different countries is really pretty vast. Then it goes into a discussion of the UNEP Global Environmental Outlook. And your book goes through the one that was most recent when the book was published, was the one published in 2012, and it goes through a lot of several of the considerations there. I'm not going to go through that here. I'm going to post a separate video for you to watch on the more recent Global Economic Outlook, which came out in 2019. So here are some of the charts that the book shows, along with that discussion of the global economic outlook. These are all in the book. Finally, there's this discussion of whether we should be optimistic or pessimistic about what's going on, because clearly, by sort of traditional economic standards, GDP per capita has grown for much of the world. Even though population is growing, so is production and technology in such a way that standards of living are really growing as well. We don't see a very bleak picture until we take the more ecological approach and we look at um, what we're doing to the planet. So if we don't consider human beings to be the center of the universe, but we think about other aspects of what's going on, then we may get a more pessimistic picture as we start to think about non-renewable resources and waste and things like that. Um, so here's this graph here is one um, that shows maybe a more pessimistic outlook of what will happen in the future. Notice that pollution, the gray line here, is pretty low in the beginning of 1900s, and around 2000 starts to really skyrocket and goes way up by 2050. The same time, you see the resources, the Earth's resources, kind of follow the exact opposite trend, where they start really high and they really plummet toward the end. And as pollution goes up, we see that population starts to fall, um, food resources start to fall, industrial output or GDP will start to fall, things like that. So this is one prediction of what may happen as we continue to use up resources and create waste. It's going to cause these other things, our food sources, to deplete, which will cause a population decline, which would also cause an industrial output or productivity decline. But we haven't seen that yet, and there is some hope that that may not be the case if, of course, we can uh, continue to see technology and use of resources become more efficient. And as we maybe switch more to use of renewable resources and things like that, we may be able to see a difference in these trends than what's predicted here in this graph.